You know, I've been around for a while. Met some interesting people. Done some crazy things. So you just might think that there's not much that can take me by surprise. You'd be wrong. The world is full of stories, science and things that amaze and confound me. Every single day, incredible mysteries that keep me awake at night. Some I can answer. Others just defy logic.
Do ghosts exist? Should we fear the paranormal? In California, a woman is terrorized by an invisible attacker. Is she the victim of a genuine haunting?
Forget the silly movies that are out there. This is real.
In New England, a mother undergoes a violent transformation. Has she been possessed by a demon?
It'll make a cold chill go up your spine.
And a British teenager claims to see ghosts. Does she have the gift?
Like the fear, it was like, uncontrollable.
Yeah. It's a weird world, and I love it. Have you ever seen a ghost? Over 90 million North Americans claim to have done just that, and 40 million others say they have physically experienced a paranormal event. Many of these events are easily explained, but some are not only weird and inexplicable, most disturbing of all, they seem to be evidence of pure evil. Do ghosts exist? And what are they anyway? Is the paranormal something we should fear? Or is it simply, hogwash?
August 8th, 1989. Barry Taff, one of the world's leading paranormal investigators, responds to the call of a distressed woman in San Pedro, California. He brings along a colleague, photographer Jeff Wheatcraft.
After 5,000 cases, you go out expecting nothing to happen. And most of the time, that's exactly what does occur, nothing.
The terrified woman is Jackie Hernandez, a single mother who claims that someone or something has turned her home into a living hell.
She reported apparitions of an old man, strange lights. Somebody tried to smother her a couple times. Things were flying at her. It was extraordinary.
But perhaps most chilling, on several occasions, Jackie claims to have seen a corpse in her son's bed. Intrigued, the ghost hunters decide to look around.
I have this attitude where I'm very skeptical because you know that a lot of people embellish and exaggerate and misrepresent what's going on.
But in Jackie's house, they find something unexpected and very weird.
We were taking pictures all over the house, and we saw this strange liquid, I don't know what, a viscous liquid dripping out of a wall.
Unable to explain the weird slime, Taff is now convinced Jackie is not faking anything and real paranormal activity is occurring in her home. They take samples and promise to return, but just 3 days later, another call. This time, it's an emergency. Whatever is in Jackie's house is on a rampage. The physical attacks have become so violent and severe, she fears for her life.
I was unavailable because my father had a heart attack, so they were there without me.
Jackie reports the evil entity is now in her attic. It has been tormenting her with strange lights and ear-shattering banging. Jeff and Gary decide to investigate. Nothing could prepare them for what they find.
They hear, oh, like a yell or a moan, and Gary turned back to see what happened to Jeff, and he couldn't see. It was too dark in the attic.
Despite his terror, Gary snaps some photos in the darkness. What they reveal will haunt them forever.
You can see that Jeff, a 6'2" man, about 215 pounds, something has wrapped itself around his neck and it's pulling him up against the rafter. And yet, there was no one there. It was Jeff and Gary. And he cut him down. He had a rope burn in his neck. It would have killed him. The question is, there was no one else there, so what? Try to kill him? How and why?
Something had tried to murder Jeff Wheatcraft. The investigators leave the house only to make another chilling discovery. The forensic lab report on the ooze from Jackie's walls is in.
The conclusion was it was human blood plasma. That's something you will lose sleep over, literally. Forget the silly movies that are out there. This is real.
Now certain they are dealing with an evil, homicidal phenomenon that tell Jackie to get out and never come back. What was in Jackie Hernandez's house, and was it out to kill? Jackie's story became known as the San Pedro haunting, one of the most mysterious paranormal events in history. But what really happened? Javier Ortega is a paranormal researcher. He has no doubt.
The Jackie Hernandez case is a very extreme case of a haunting. If somebody dared me to go in that house, I wouldn't set foot in there.
Haunting. We've all heard of it. But what does it really mean?
In a haunting, it's usually the spirit of a deceased person, the homeowner that passed away in that house, and they were so attached to a physical object or location that they come back.
Was Jackie's house haunted by someone who had died there? Incredibly, the investigation uncovered something bizarre.
During the investigation of the Jackie Hernandez case, she reported that her and some friends were playing with the Ouija board, and they were able to talk with the spirit in the house. And the spirit had told them that he was a Marine that was murdered. So they went out and they did some research, and they found out that there was a Marine named Herman Hendrickson who was found dead in 1930.
Was the spirit of a murdered Marine responsible for the attacks on Jackie and Wheatcraft? Does a haunting explain the other things she experienced?
A lot of the things that were reported were apparitions, whether it was a disembodied head floating in the attic or a corpse-like old man sitting in her child's bed. She also reported seeing strange lights. They were described as globs of luminous light. Free-floating globs of light have been reported in haunted places as well.
But for Ortega, most compelling evidence of a haunting is that mysterious goo Barry and Jeff found oozing from Jackie's walls.
I mean, it just sounds so bizarre, that you have human blood plasma oozing from the walls. And when they checked, there wasn't any device that, that was emitting this substance. So that, to me, it has to be one of the most compelling cases in the paranormal.
Was the Marine so angry about being murdered that he bled through Jackie's walls? Incredibly, Ortega thinks Jackie wasn't the only victim.
When Jackie Hernandez left the premise, people who inhabited that home have also reported strange activities. They reported objects being moved around, pots and pans being moved around, and they reported being touched by unseen forces. When you have a lot of physical activity in a supposed haunted location, it tends to speak volumes for the amount of energy that resides in that home. And we don't know, as paranormal researchers, we don't know if it's due to psychokinetic forces or if it's due to location hauntings. If you have the same reports happening year after year on the same location when there's different tenants, it usually tends to point towards it being a location haunting.
What an incredible story. I mean, strange things happen around my house too, but once I say I'm sorry, everything's forgiven. But human blood? dripping from walls and a spirit that is so angry it tries to kill you? I mean, who are they going to call? Ghostbusters? I've always wanted to say that.
Was Jackie Hernandez the victim of a haunting? Or was it something else?
It does not appear that the house would fit the classic haunting.
A terrified woman reports extreme paranormal events in her home. Weird lights, strange noises, even physical attacks. Did Jackie Hernandez live in a haunted house?
It does not appear that the house would fit the classic haunting.
Lloyd Auerbach is a paranormal investigator. He believes the answer isn't ghosts at all.
Knowing what I know about the Jackie Hernandez case, it seemed that she herself was a poltergeist agent.
Poltergeist? Isn't that just a hyperactive ghost? Or is there a difference?
What we learned in the last 100 years is that these things relate typically not to ghost sightings, not to hauntings per se, not to a place being haunted, but to a person, an individual in the situation who is typically stressed or otherwise put upon. There's possibly epileptic or having epileptic type activity. It's about a third perhaps of the cases. And the expression, instead of by an entity, is by the entity in the body. It's by a person's unconscious blowing off steam or having a seizure, essentially. It's kind of like a seizure in some of these people as well. But it's not a ghost-related situation. If you go on the web and look at a lot of ghost hunting sites, you'll see poltergeist is a particular type of ghost, mischievous spirit. Most of the folks who are on the web have no background in parapsychology. They don't know the literature for the last 100 or so years. They don't know how we've actually come to these conclusions, or they don't know how the fact that we can actually stop these cases, whereas it's a little bit harder when you have a reported ghost instance or a haunting to deal with that.
Many now believe poltergeists are not ghosts, but a manifestation of something called psychokinesis.
We call it PK for short, and it's the idea that the mind can directly interact or affect matter and energy. We typically think of it in the paranormal world as affecting things outside your body, whether it be moving objects, what people often call telekinesis, or bending metal, or even healing.
Was Jackie Hernandez herself causing the weird phenomenon in her own house? If so, why? And for that matter, how?
Certain people, their unconscious minds let loose. I mean, we see people who are stressed out, who are put upon in society, in really expressing that stress in different ways. Some people get enraged and they break things. Some people shoot people. Some people keep it bottled up, and it can explode in kind of a different direction for certain individuals, which is a psychokinetic direction. And we call those situations where they're stressed, think of it as an unconscious temper tantrum. It's happening outside themselves and just starts throwing things around, probably like they'd like to do if they actually physically could do it. But by having their unconscious throw things around, who's going to get blamed? The invisible force, the invisible ghost, certainly not the person who's stressed out. When we talk about the stress involved in these PK events, which are often called poltergeist cases, we're not talking about typical stress of, just day-to-day stress, sitting in traffic, being frustrated because your computer couldn't work, which may actually be related back to the PK. Those kinds of stresses do show in small ways sometimes, but they can, again, come out in a lot of different ways. For example, road rage, or people just screaming at the driver across the way without acting on it. You release that stress. People have other ways of doing it. In poltergeist cases, the stresses tend to be very psychologically oriented in most of these cases. So they can be related to deep-seated issues around the family or even around the working conditions. They are typically not expressed in other ways, so there's no outlet for most of these people. In other conditions, these would be the kids or the adults who are going to act out in a very bad way, whether it be breaking things or doing something else, typically. So we have a different kind of stress level involved, but it can be very, very much under the surface. I had a case, for example, years ago, where the woman was recovering memories of her father abusing her as a child. And that caused significant stress, especially as she talked to a therapist about it. And that was extended out to a poltergeist incident. By talking to her, you wouldn't know. I mean, there's just no way you'd see that that stress was there. And it was a completely different kind of stress than we think of as just being frustrated by day-to-day activity.
Was Jackie's unconscious mind throwing a temper tantrum? And if so, why? It could be due to the fact she was experiencing emotional issues at the time following a difficult divorce.
There was enough going on in her life and, frankly, enough psychological issues that would indicate that she was responsible for most of the phenomena that was happening. In most poltergeist cases, people rarely ever think of themselves as the agent.
According to Auerbach, the most compelling argument that Jackie was both the victim and the problem is what happened when she moved 600 kilometers away. Incredibly, the vicious paranormal attacks on her continued.
In poltergeist cases, when people move, the phenomena follows them because it's coming from them. And that also happened in that particular case.
But if Jackie was her own poltergeist, how is it that the new tenants also reported paranormal attacks?
We've had cases where people have heard about the case and have gone home, and because they're so freaked out by the situation, they start witnessing things. That has happened, so you can think of it almost like a contagious idea. It is possible that it was a haunted house. It is possible there was an entity there. We can't completely exclude that, but it best fit the poltergeist model.
Could it be that Jackie herself was responsible for the weird goings-on? Or were they the result of an altogether different kind of bad vibe? Professor John Huntington believes the Jackie Hernandez case can be explained by undetectable audio waves known as infrasound.
Sound is just the vibration in air pressure. That's how we perceive it, and that's how it gets into your ear. Infrasound is below the range that we can hear as an audible sound, but we're still being affected by the sound wave is still impinging on our bodies. In fact, right now in the room, we have a pretty loud 19 hertz, 19 cycle per second infrasound wave going, but it's not really audible as a sound, and it's quite a bit louder than the speech, the level of the speech that I'm talking at right now. But it's still there, and it's still affecting us. It's still pressurizing the air that I'm breathing, that I'm speaking.
Human ears can't detect ultra-low frequencies. If it's below 20 hertz, you can't hear it.
Your body makes lots of sounds down at very low frequencies, such as your heartbeat, the movement of your blood, breath noise coming in and out of your body. If we could hear all that, it would drive us crazy. But we're still being affected by it. The sound wave is still impinging on our body.
But other than our own bodies, what might cause these low frequencies?
Man-made sources of infrasound could be anything from a piece of air handling equipment in a building, anything like a train, a truck, anything that's big stuff that's moving could generate these very low frequency sounds.
Incredibly, Huntington believes low-frequency sound waves could have caused Jackie Hernandez's unpleasant experiences.
So in addition to things like headaches and nausea being caused by exposure to infrasound, there have been some reports of feeling a presence or some sort of hallucination or feeling like strange things are going on in the room. A lot of that was documented by two researchers at Coventry University, Tandy and Lawrence, in the late 90s. They were working in a space, sort of an underground space as I understand it, and they had all kinds of just strange experiences. People would think that somebody was standing next to them, and when there wasn't anybody in the room, they'd be feeling alone and felt like there was a presence in the room, and there wasn't anybody else there. All kinds of strange experiences happening in this one space. And this would build up, of course, would build up anxiety, having these sort of constant sort of strange experiences. And then one of the researchers brought a fencing foil into the room to work on it, clamped it into a vise, and it started moving on its own. And it was sort of flopping up and down at both ends where it wasn't secured in the vise. That led the Tandy and Lawrence to research this, and they ended up doing some acoustical measurements in the room and found that a piece of air handling equipment was causing a very loud 19 cycle per second infrasound sound wave in the room. And in addition, the physical geometry of the space was causing that sound wave to build up in certain locations in the lab. And then this was, as soon as they turned the HVAC equipment off, or actually decoupled that piece of equipment from the mounting equipment where it was transmitting, all the strange experiences went away.
Can infrasound exposure mimic the experience of a haunting?
And infrasound could possibly cause something like a hallucination or an apparition or some other things like that based on the vibration of the sound wave actually affecting the eye. The eye itself could resonate or get a very strong sort of vibration, and that could cause blurring of vision or possible issues around the periphery of the vision. Those things coupled with already being in sort of a spooky location, being on edge by the infrasound, could certainly cause some sort of ghostly experiences.
Could Huntington's theory be correct? Does the paranormal activity witnessed in San Pedro have a rational explanation? And does it explain human plasma oozing from the wall? Was Jackie's home haunted, or was she her own poltergeist? Whatever the answer, this story is certainly weird. Or what? A Connecticut housewife is tortured from within. Has she been possessed by an evil spirit?
Demons like to attack good people.
Many of us have experienced events that we would call paranormal, but in fact are just things that are harmless and easily explained. But what is the paranormal? And does it exist? Even the name is a little, well, weird and scary. Here's the way it's described in the dictionary. Paranormal, the claimed occurrence of an event without scientific explanation. As psychokinesis, extrasensory perception of other purportedly supernatural phenomena. All right, guys, come on, that's it. You can fool some. Oh boy, oh boy. But some people experience paranormal events that are real. So real, in fact, they're deadly. Weird. Or what?
History professor John Kerner studies reports of paranormal activity. None have haunted him more than the story of Patricia Redding.
By all accounts, she was a good person. I mean, there's nothing you can see in her past that would indicate why this happens to her.
In 1992, Patricia's life took a terrifying turn. Doing chores around her home in Litchfield, Connecticut, she suddenly hears a terrifying voice.
Worship Satan.
She felt what she thought was an evil presence that was around her. There was nothing that could explain this.
Patricia tries to brush it off, but the eerie voice won't stop, ever.
Honor Satan.
It's the beginning of a horrifying ordeal.
Stop!
The situation got much, much worse. Pet had a number of things that were happening to her that were very unusual. There were bite marks on the back of her neck, bruises on the back of her body, things she could not do by herself.
What could be inflicting Patricia's vicious bruises and other injuries? It's a frightening and bizarre mystery. Devastated and disturbed, she seeks help.
The family took Patricia Redding to the hospital, to local doctors. They ruled out all the conditions that could possibly be affecting her.
With no medical explanation, Patricia resorts to hoping her problems will simply go away.
But then things started getting much worse after that. She was knocked over horribly. She did not know what is happening.
Again and again, a seemingly evil presence hurls her into the wall.
These are things that never could happen to Pat Redding in a normal situation. She is not herself. She's becoming someone else.
Fearing for her safety, Patricia has only one place to turn.
At that point, the Catholic Church got involved.
Patricia's bishop takes her claims seriously. After an examination, he reaches an incredible conclusion.
They make the diagnosis, yes, she is possessed. Demons like to attack good people.
There's only one solution, an ancient ritual as old as the church itself. The bishop decides he will perform an exorcism.
he called upon the demon to reveal himself and say who you are, reveal yourself in the name of Jesus Christ. Almost every religion really believes in evil in some form or another. But the difference with the Catholic Church is that the Catholic Church believes evil is actually a physical manifestation in this world. It's not just a concept.
At first, the demon stays hidden, but not for long.
She was speaking in a language that she could not speak in normally, trying to insult the priest, insult his family, things that she never would have done on her own. These are pretty clear signs you're dealing with an evil entity inside the person's body.
Having forced the demon into the open, the real battle begins.
Things like holy objects, this often can anger the demon. These are tools in a war that can cause them to be so upset. The words of Christ makes them so angry. So it has to be said over and over again. It's a war of attrition.
The battle rages for hours. At long last, something breaks.
Demons, they get so upset they just can't take this any longer, and they'll go somewhere else. They'll go bother somebody else.
The exhausting battle ends with the demons on the run. But before long, they're back.
Evil is real. It can affect someone in some horrible ways.
Sadly, Patricia runs out of time. After 16 exorcisms, in 2005 she dies of cancer, believed to be caused by her demons. Incredibly, Patricia's story is far from the only one. An estimated 15,000 exorcisms are performed each year. Can evil really live inside us? Or is there some other way to explain demonic possession? Christopher Rossick is a psychologist. He says he knows exactly what happened to Patricia Redding.
Coming from a religious perspective, you might assume that this must be a demonic presence. But as a psychologist, my diagnosis would be dissociative identity disorder.
Better known as a split personality, dissociative identity disorder is when two or more personalities inhabit one mind. An abusive childhood can sometimes cause such a psychological break. One personality becomes the happy face, the person the world sees. The other deals with all the hidden pain, shame, and suffering.
The primary personality is unaware of the other personality. They may hear voices and have these sort of signs, but they don't know what it's about.
Were the demonic voices Patricia heard really the screams of a tortured second personality? Could it have even tried to hurt her?
I had a patient who would end up in a graveyard with her blade in her hand and having cut her arm.
Is a self-destructive alter ego responsible for Patricia's injuries? Can psychology explain the power of an exorcism?
After the exorcism, the individual experiences complete and sudden remission of their symptoms. And of course, that's considered proof positive that the demon has been removed. An alternative way of looking at that, however, is that the prayer, the ritual is in fact just served to rearrange these separate identities such that they have receded from the host's awareness. They don't hear the voice anymore. Then what I experience happen with some patients is that maybe weeks or months later, the voices come back. And then they think, well, you know, I must have invited it back, or something's wrong with me, I'm really evil. And so that's just to say that that experience of the sudden symptom relief after an exorcism is not a clear indicator that there was a demonic presence that was expelled at that point. Everything I'm saying here is in no way meant to malign the value of religious, spiritual care. But there are some psychological ways of understanding these experiences that really should be taken into account.
Demonic possession. Ordinary people suddenly possessed by nasty entities. Ring a bell? Ah, you know, I've seen all the movies, Omen 1, 2, 3, The Exorcist, a lot. And guess what? Not only do they not scare me, but I don't believe them. I mean, just because it gets a little stormy doesn't mean the devil is on his way to take over your soul, does it? Yeah, as for all that other ridiculous stuff like twisting heads, speaking in strange tongues.
Is demonic possession all in our heads? Or is there a more frightening answer?
What Satan can do is invade human bodies.
A Connecticut woman appears to have been possessed by an evil demon. Could she be suffering from a split personality? Or is the explanation far more terrifying? Reverend Bob Larson is not your average man of God.
I am, among other things, an exorcist.
Larson has studied Patricia Redding's possession and is convinced it was real.
There are those who would like to have the public believe that demonic possession is rare. I can tell you, it's not rare. It'll make a cold chill go up your spine.
Are demons really all around us? Are they trying to take over the bodies of innocent humans?
The Bible teaches that when Satan was cast out of heaven, a third of the angels involved in that insurrection were cast out with him.
According to the book of Revelation, when Satan lost his war with God, he and his followers were banished to the spirit realm on earth.
Satan is now an invisible spirit being. Satan can't pull the trigger of a gun, but what Satan can do is invade human bodies, and those people then become the instruments of evil.
Larson believes demonic possession has a firm basis in Scripture. He's also certain that Patricia's condition wasn't a case of split personality.
I deal a lot with multiple personality disorder. I know the difference. When you see the demon have such utter hatred for God and religious objects such as the cross, that aversion means it's something more than psychosis. That's when you know they are possessed.
But there's one thing Larson believes is the ultimate proof of demonic presence.
In the Pat Reading case, she apparently spoke in another language. I've seen this happen thousands and thousands of times. I had a woman speak Chinese one time. I had a fascinating case where a strange language was being spoken and a college professor with a PhD in ancient Semitic languages. He said, I can come up and tell you exactly what the voice was saying. And he did. And the voice was speaking about his possession of the person and how it was determined to destroy them. Now, this was a PhD college professor who was giving testimony to it.
Could these foreign, even forgotten languages prove that Satan is carrying on an age-old war by invading the bodies of humans?
To the skeptics who may not believe in demonic possession, I say, travel with me and meet the thousands of people who have had exorcisms. When you see the smile and the glow on the person's face as they say to you, wow, I didn't know I could feel like this. Something is gone. That's why I do exorcisms.
Are exorcisms ultimate proof that devilish spirits still roam the earth? Could reports of demonic possession be explained by a misunderstood mental illness, or is everyone simply making it up? Whatever the truth, this mystery is most definitely weird. Or what?
I don't know about you,
But stories of ghosts and the paranormal send shivers up my spine. But that's kind of fun, right? But do spirits or ghosts or whatever they are always have to be evil? Aren't there any friendly dead people out there? I hope so. But there's some people who not only enjoy having ghosts around, they can talk to them whenever they like. How? They've got the gift. In just about every way, Faye Jackson is an average teenage girl.
I like to shop and just hang out with my friends.
While Faye's life appears to be ordinary, in truth, she and her family are dealing with something so sensitive, they've chosen to conceal their appearance.
Although it has become part of everyday life for us, it is still at times frightening.
Faye's story began 3 years ago when she was 10.
I was sitting in my bedroom on my own. I could feel a man sitting next to me.
She could feel like an energy, like a presence next to her.
And I could just feel his breath in my ear and it was all warm.
And then she heard him whispering in her ear.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Faye races to her mom.
Like the fear, it was like uncontrollable. It was unexplainable.
The child was absolutely terrified. And I was scared for her, to be honest.
When Lynn takes her daughter back to the room, the man is gone. But Faye is in no doubt as to what she's experienced.
I saw my first ghost.
Terrifyingly, Faye's encounter was just the beginning.
The spirits started regularly visiting me. They'd only come when I was on my own, and when they did, just random spirits would walk into my bedroom.
Faye is haunted by hundreds of ghosts. Sometimes she sees as many as 5 a night.
Sometimes they just want to show her how they died, which is a little bit grim at times, and she's only 13.
The ghosts begin getting bolder.
There was an instant when her bed was shook, which completely terrified me.
I just felt like I was being attacked. It was horrible. It felt really dangerous, and I felt like I was on my own.
That was when I knew we had to do something about it.
At her wit's end, Lynn seeks professional advice.
We got lots of help from local mediums who understood what was happening.
Far from seeing it as something frightening, the mediums tell them Faye's ability to see and connect with the dead is a gift, and a very rare one at that.
They taught Faye techniques that she could use to take more of a control over her gift and to see it as a gift, really.
With the help of psychic mediums, the support of her mother, and lots of hard work, Faye finally mastered her gift.
It's like I have 2 lives. Like I live one life where I'm just a normal girl, and then other times I can talk to spirits. So it's really quite exciting.
I see dead people. That's something else I've always wanted to say, but I can't because I don't. Well, not when I'm sober anyway. But incredibly, it may be because I'm an adult. You see, Faye isn't alone. Millions of other children see dead people too. How? Do they possess a special power, a 6th sense? And is it a gift or a curse? Weird. Or what?
13-year-old Faye Jackson claims she can see ghosts. Do children possess the gift? Who better to ask about children who see ghosts than Karen Good, author of Children Who See Ghosts.
To discover that children see ghosts and talk with ghosts, to me it was exciting.
After more than 25 years researching the special abilities of young minds, Good has reached an incredible conclusion.
Children are more predisposed to see ghosts than adults are, primarily because of their brain power. The sixth sense begins to develop in children between the ages of 18 months all the way up through 5 to 6 years. And the reason is because their brain is going through a tremendous growth spurt.
We've all heard of the sixth sense, but what is it? What does it do that your other 5 can't?
When I discuss with a parent, for example, what is the sixth sense? I explain it to a parent as being intuitive intelligence. Some people have a heightened intuition, particularly sensitive children. We call them sensitive because they may be sensitive to the feelings of someone who might be ill. Or a child, one child that I'm aware of used to tell me about, he would know a car accident when his mom was driving. He would get nauseated, and it always correlated for him with a nearby car accident. So I think that a sixth sense involves feeling and intuition, and it could involve heightened sensitivities.
But where does this sixth sense come from? Is it a gift only bestowed on some? Remarkably, Good believes it's an ability that's within us all.
The pineal gland is located within the brain, which actually regulates light within our body. I believe the pineal gland can be a doorway to the sixth sense.
But if we all have the ability to access our sixth sense, why do so few children maintain this power into adulthood?
As the hormones change, children go through brainwave shifts, mood shifts, and that's the time logic develops. And children may turn away from their intuition, their feelings. If children have not been encouraged in their imagination, in their conversations, and sixth sense development, it can shut down when cognition sets in.
Do children's growing brains give them a sixth sense? Should a child's ghost sightings be encouraged? Do kids, like Faye, really have the gift?
My initial reaction to reading the article about Faye was, quite honestly, I wasn't impressed.
Psychic Jack Rourke is an expert in parapsychology. Experience has taught him that a far more mundane explanation may be at work, or rather at home.
There is a phenomenon called parentizing, where, in essence, there's a bit of a role reversal, where a child can sometimes become the caretaker of the parent or become the mirror to the parent.
Rourke believes that through parentizing, children can be actively encouraged to say they see ghosts.
The more positive reinforcement a child gets from their parent that they are special, that they are extra sensitive, that they have special empathic or intuitive abilities, the more the child then believes they're psychic. And I'll give you an example of how this is done. A child wakes up in the middle of the night from a horrible dream and is talking about ghosts, chasing them, things like this. You come in as the parent and say, no, you're wrong, that didn't happen. You lose the ability to comfort the child because they've been made wrong. Now, I go into the room, same scenario, and I say, oh, you saw a ghost, didn't you? Yes. This is how it's done.
But why would a child like Faye go along with the idea of seeing ghosts? What's in it for her?
The specialness of the child in these circumstances gives the child permission to commiserate with the parent. They become their emotional partner. They go to activities together. They may go to certain psychic functions, and this unique relationship becomes a reward to the child. And in order to maintain that closeness with their parent, they have to maintain the psychic identity. For the parent, this also gives them a passive means to control the child. And also, what I've witnessed is a way to slow down their development and prolong their childhood. So this is an interesting thing, one of the things that we look at. Now, why per se a child might have a specific experience Could be biological, could be an environmental reason. It could just be an ordinary bad dream.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Are children who see ghosts merely playing out a fantasy with the encouragement of their parents? Is there nothing special about them at all? Does the gift exist in children at all?
A person like Faye may be capable of seeing ghosts because she has some physiological advantage.
Thousands of children across the globe claim they can see dead people. Do they have an extra special sense known as the gift? Paranormal investigator Joshua P. Warren believes there could be a medical explanation for this phenomena.
A person like Faye may be capable of seeing ghosts because she has some physiological advantage in her eyeballs themselves.
Could Faye's eye have powers the rest of ours don't? Warren believes her secret may be that she sees light differently.
Right now, all the data that we have indicates ghosts are more visible in the infrared realm. Some of the best ghost images I've seen have been captured using infrared technology.
Could Faye be seeing ghosts that are all around us? Ghosts that most of us miss because we can't see infrared?
The average person can only see a relatively narrow band of light, from usually around green to red. Faye might be able to see a little bit more than the rest of us.
Scientists call the range of light the visible spectrum, although most of us know it as the colors of the rainbow. But what if Faye was somehow able to literally see what the rest of us can't?
In the human eye, there are two primary types of cells. You've got the rod cells and the cone cells. Rod cells are used for nighttime vision, but they can't see color. Then you have the cone cells, which respond very quickly, and they see color. If Faye has more of those rod or cone cells, especially the cones, that alone might allow her to see a broader range of colors and frequencies than the average person. Her eyes physiologically allow her to peer deeper into the infrared or ultraviolet realms.
Incredibly, Warren also believes the eye might not just explain Faye's story, but also why children, on average, report seeing more ghosts than adults.
As a person ages, the components of the eye become more and more dense. In extreme cases, they can become very cloudy and form a cataract. So the older you get, the less you're able to see when it comes to this band of frequencies. Children are not only able to see a wider range of frequencies, but they also should have an open mind and open awareness. They have not been structured so much yet into a belief system and into a task-driven day-to-day routine that gives us tunnel vision as adults. As children, they still have a wider awareness and perception of what's around them and the willingness to acknowledge honestly what they see.
Could Faye and other children like her really be able to see into the infrared world of ghosts? Does she have a sixth sense? Or is Faye just a needy kid who wanted her mother's attention and approval? We may never know. Weird. Or what? So there we have it. Ghost stories from around the world. A Californian woman's home plays host to one of the most terrifying paranormal events on record. In New England, a woman is possessed by an evil spirit so strong, even the Catholic Church fails to defeat it. and a British teenager can see and talk to ghosts, is she proof that some children have the gift? Are these bizarre stories evidence that ghosts exist? Can we seek comfort in rational explanations, or do we ignore them at our peril? You decide.
Join me again next time for more stories that will undoubtedly be weird or what?
You know, I've been around for a while. I've met some interesting people. Done some crazy things. You'd think that there wasn't much that could take me by surprise. You'd be wrong. The world is full of stories and science and things that amaze and confound me every single day. Incredible mysteries that keep me awake at night. Some I can answer, and others just defy logic.
Do the dead haunt everyday objects? In Atlanta, the pilots of a crashed airliner returned from the grave.
I know what I saw was real.
Can an airplane be possessed? In Britain, a near-fatal attack on a boy is blamed on the painting.
He felt this force in his back. Something had pushed him down the stairs.
Can a work of art harbor demons? And after an earthquake in New Zealand, a man is attacked by a ghost.
All I could feel was I was getting strangled.
Do natural disasters release spectral energy?
Yeah, that's a weird world, and I love it.
Have you ever seen a ghost or something that you think is a ghost? Well, let me tell you, my house is full of them. Whoa! Whoa! That was a big one. Yeah, they're everywhere. Make my day, spirit boy. Yeah, they're in the walls, on the floors. You never know where they're going to turn up, so you need to be prepared, right? But not all ghosts are products of Hollywood. Millions of us claim we've not only encountered them in our homes, but almost anywhere and in anything. Can bricks and mortar or other inanimate objects be havens for the spirits? Are they contained in everything around us? I don't know, but I do know this. The one place you don't want to find them is on an airplane. Summer 1973. Eastern Airlines flight attendant Enid Grigg is working a busy shift.
We flew Portland, Seattle, Seattle, Omaha, and then Omaha, St. Louis, and then St. Louis, Atlanta.
Although Grigg loves her job, tonight she's feeling under the weather.
I had stomach flu or something. So I asked the senior flight attendant if I could go down in the galley and just get away. And she says, well, the flight's really light, so why don't you go down there and, you know, hang out for a bit. So I went downstairs and I just laid down. I was laying there for a while. I don't know whether I had fallen off to sleep or not.
Suddenly, Enid is aware that something isn't right. Although she came down alone, she senses another presence in the galley. Someone is watching her.
All of a sudden, I see a pilot standing down at my feet. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm embarrassed. You know, I'm down here sleeping. I'm not supposed to be doing this.
Not only has she been napping on the job, she's been caught by the captain. Enid is mortified.
There was just no communication between the two of us. It was just him standing there kind of like watching me. And then he just moved off.
Desperate to make amends, Enid consults a fellow attendant.
I went over and I said, Linda, I said, didn't you see that pilot down here? She she says, there wasn't any pilot down here. I said, yes, there was. I saw him.
Frustrated and confused, Enid decides to apologize to the captain.
I went straight into the cockpit and asked them, were you downstairs? And they said no. And I knew the guys. I knew they wouldn't lie to me.
So who did Enid see in the galley? Had she imagined the entire incident?
There weren't any other pilots on the plane. The uniform looked like it was brand new. The stripes were bright yellow. It was very real. I wasn't asleep when I saw him. I don't believe in ghosts, but I know what I saw was real.
So it seems did many others. Around the same time as Enid's encounter, reports come in of strange apparitions on other Eastern airplanes. Neil Holland is a former Eastern Airlines pilot.
There were some people that reported unusual events on that airplane. Not only in the galley, but in the aisles of the airplane.
The reports have one thing in common. Witnesses say they recognize the ghostly pilots. They are Captain Bob Loft and flight engineer Don Repo. Every Eastern employee knows who they are because Bob and Don are dead. They were killed when Eastern Flight 401 crashed into the Florida Everglades in 1972.
Even the vice president of Eastern Airlines saw what they said was a ghost of Captain Loft and also Second Officer Don Repo. Eastern Flight 401 departed Kennedy Airport December 29, 1972, nonstop from Miami, Florida, and it had 176 passengers on board the airplane. That's the crew and the passenger count. And it arrived in Miami at about 11:30 that evening. Everything was going fine for the flight until on final approach, when the gear was lowered, there was the absence of the nose gear light. And of course the crew called for a go-around because the gear was unsafe, they thought at the time. When the airplane was then cleared out into an area to explore what the situation really was, the airplane inadvertently, after the autopilot had been put on, was bumped off. And the airplane, without the crew noticing, started a slow descent until about 3 or 4 minutes after the go-around, the airplane hit into the Everglades. Its left wing, and it crashed at that time. There were 69 passengers that survived out of 173. The entire flight crew eventually passed. Bob Loft was killed.
Throughout the summer of '73, more Eastern employees report ghostly appearances.
There was a pilot next to the passenger, and all of a sudden, the pilot disappeared. And that pilot was reported to have been Captain Bob Loft.
Some of the sightings are so terrifying, they disrupt airline operations.
They canceled one flight because of the appearance. It shook up a flight attendant and the crew, whether it was Don Repo or Captain Loft, I'm not certain of that.
As the ghost story spread, Eastern Airlines tries to limit the damage. But then, the airline makes a stunning admission. It salvaged undamaged equipment from the wreckage of Flight 401 and had it installed in other aircraft in the fleet.
A lot of the galley parts were put in other airplanes, and some of the electronics was put in the other airplanes.
Then an even more disturbing fact emerges. Most of the ghost sightings are taking place in and around the recycled parts, especially in the aircraft galleys.
One of the flight attendants actually saw one of the appearances of Don Repo. He appeared in one of the ovens looking out, and that pretty much shook her up. Needless to say, management did not like what was happening as far as rumors about this airplane and the stories that were developing as a result of these parts being put in these other aircraft. And so I'm sure there was pressure from management that don't tell stories about this airplane. I never was threatened by any of the management of Eastern Airlines.
The outcry over the ghost sightings forced Eastern to remove the reclaimed components from its fleet. The reports of apparitions plummet, but not entirely.
The stories continued until the demise of Eastern Airlines in 1991. And I have heard that some of the other carriers that actually received some of our equipment were also seeing sightings.
What a fascinating story. This is weird, or what? Can mechanical parts be haunted by souls involved in accidents? And if it can happen on planes, can it happen in other vehicles? Just last week, I was driving through the canyon and boom! Out of nowhere, I felt something go under the wheels, and I never found it.
Did ghosts from a crashed plane haunt Eastern Airlines flights? Paranormal researcher Teresa Bain is the author of the Encyclopedia of Demons.
I believe that there are things that happen that we can't rationally explain just because as human beings we don't have the biology to fully understand everything that's happening in our world.
Bain is in no doubt about the origins of the ghosts of Flight 401. She thinks they're a paranormal phenomenon that attached itself to parts salvaged from the crash. It's called a multi-dimensional hologram.
Multi-dimensional holograms are what some people call ghosts, and it's when a human's energy is transferred and imprinted upon a place or an object and is able to penetrate the veil between dimensions.
Bain says that unlike a ghost, these types of apparition cannot actually speak or react to human beings. That would explain why the ghostly captain didn't say a word to Enid in the galley.
I don't believe that any of the ghosts could have interacted freely with any of the witnesses at any point because it's like a recording. You can listen to your favorite records and you know where all the pops and cracks are, but you can't interact with them.
But how did the aircraft parts get imprinted with these phantom recordings? Bain thinks it happened during the final moments of Flight 401 as Captain Bob Loft struggled to save his plane.
Captain Bob's final moments had to be absolutely terrifying and horrific. He had these lives of these people at stake. He had to do everything he could to save them, and he knew he was not going to be able to.
Bain theorizes the dying captain's psychic energy was so strong it had the power to defy the laws of physics.
In his final moments, when he did expire and that energy was released, it had to be a tremendous explosion, and with such energy and force that it must have been released, and I have no doubt whatsoever that it embedded in those objects.
Could the ghosts of Flight 401 be a residual haunting? Can tragedies imprint images of the dead onto inanimate objects? Or does the answer to this mystery lie elsewhere?
We have patients who are actually referred because they believe they're seeing ghosts.
Crews report mysterious apparitions on Eastern Airlines flights. Were the aircraft haunted by souls of dead pilots? Sleep specialist Dr. Charles Samuels doesn't think so.
Personally, I do not believe in ghosts. We have patients who are actually referred because they believe they're seeing ghosts. And this is called a hypnagogic hallucination, and it occurs in very specific situations. And in 2 of the cases that I can remember of a few, they're actually related to the withdrawal of significant street drugs.
But he does believe flight crews were having visions.
These people could perceive that they saw ghosts, where in fact it really was more a hallucination.
But what could have caused the hallucinations? It could be something flight crews suffer from more than almost any other profession: sleep disruption.
People in the airline industry clearly are exposed to situations where they don't get enough sleep, but they're also sleeping at a different time or awake at a different time.
This leads to the disruption of one of the body's most delicate mechanisms, the biological clock, or the circadian rhythm.
The circadian rhythm is our daily biological rhythm, which is controlled by a specific part of the brain. And it's that place in the brain that sets our clock every day. And human beings have to have their clock set every day.
The circadian rhythm is controlled by a part of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN.
Sunlight comes through the eye to the retina. It sends a signal back to the SCN, and that's what sets up the clock every day.
But when humans are sleep deprived and their biological clock isn't reset, Dr. Samuels thinks the brain goes haywire, leading to a state where people experience hallucinations.
These boundaries don't exist between wake and sleep as concrete as we think they do. They do overlap, and this is an example of one where people would say, I saw a ghost, where in fact it was the brain having the dream part of sleep during wake.
Could sleep deprivation account for the sightings of Flight 401's dead pilots? And if so, why did they stop after the airline removed the salvage parts? Ophthalmologist Dr. Andrew Dahl agrees that hallucinations are behind the Flight 401 ghost sightings.
When I first heard the story about the ghosts, I immediately felt that these people were not lying. To them, it was a very real event.
But he thinks they're caused by high-energy radiation from outer space, known as cosmic rays.
Cosmic radiation is radiation that's released by the sun, through sunspots and solar activity, and also by other areas in our galaxy where supernovas explode.
Dr. Dahl is convinced this high-energy radiation is especially hazardous for pilots and flight attendants.
The higher you are above the plane of the Earth, the more cosmic rays that there are. Flight crews fly at high altitudes. Therefore, they are subject to higher levels of cosmic radiation than the normal person. In addition, they fly over the poles on flights between Asia and North America, let's say, or South America and Australia. And the levels of cosmic radiation are much higher at the poles because of some irregularities in the Earth's magnetic field.
Dr. Dahl is certain the radiation has a devastating impact on the eyes, causing cataracts, where the lens of the eye clouds over.
Flight crews are 3 times more likely to develop cataracts than the normal population.
But how do cataracts cause hallucination? The answer could be a rare condition known as Charles Bonnet syndrome, where the brain compensates for vision loss by creating its own images.
There was a Swiss philosopher by the name of Charles Bonnet who lived in the 18th century, whose grandfather had limited vision. And Charles Bonnet's grandfather would describe to him, with his limited vision, all the things that he could see. People, faces, imaginary things, things he'd seen in the past, strange objects. And we know now that this happens in people who have significantly decreased vision. It's called the Charles Bonnet syndrome. And as we look at this phenomenon, we realize that it doesn't necessarily happen in people who've had long-standing visual loss. We have found that if you close your eyes or you dream, your brain by itself, with your eyes closed, produces visual images. And those may be visual images such as we dream about, which may be a loved one or a long-departed one, something we've never seen, something we can only imagine. And the brain puts these images out all the time, continuously. When our eyes are open, the images from our eyes are stronger than those emanating from our brain. But when we close our eyes, or when it's darker, sometimes the images from the brain supersede the images from our eyes and fill things in or replace things. The flight attendant that's waking up, vision's a little blurry, darkened area, will see something and their brain will fill in the difference and come up with a ghostly image, which their brain is manufacturing, which will seem perfectly real to them.
Were the ghosts of Flight 401 only dancing across the aircrew's retinas? Or were the plane's spare parts haunted? And who or what did Enid Grigg see in the galley? We may never know. Weird or what? In Britain, a near-fatal attack on a 10-year-old boy is blamed on a painting.
Something had pushed him down the stairs.
You know, as I get older, I look for new ways to relax, and I've recently discovered painting. And you take this piece, for example. We have a contrast of light and dark colors here.
and textures. I've created space. I have your characters retreat into the back of the canvas, and it has no real lines due to its pointillist styling. Can you see it? Work like this takes a lot of time and emotion. One gives one's heart and soul to achieve this level of creativity, and that's just what it takes to make great art. Well, our next story features another equally brilliant artiste. He too gave himself to his work, but all he saw was darkness. Maryport, England, 1999. Sean Robinson returns home from his grandmother's wake with a peculiar inheritance. A mysterious painting she owned for decades, but inexplicably kept hidden from all but her closest relatives. It's called The Anguished Man.
It was my grandmother's painting, and she kept it in her house, but locked away. She didn't like it, so she kept it out of sight. But she used to show me it, and I absolutely loved the painting. And of course, when my grandmother passed away, she wanted me to have the painting.
The picture's origins are shrouded in mystery.
She got it off a family friend. She didn't know the artist's name, where the painting came from, where it originated or anything.
But what Sean does know sends chills up his spine. According to the legend, the Anguished Man is a self-portrait of a man so tormented, he mutilated himself while creating it.
The painting was painted using oils mixed in with the artist's own blood.
Even more macabre is what happened once it was completed.
When he'd finished the painting, he committed suicide.
But instead of being sickened, Sean is excited about owning the Anguished Man.
Being brought up watching horror films, I knew it wasn't real. So I didn't believe in the supernatural at all.
His wife Dawn is horrified. She refuses to have it in the house.
So we came to a compromise. I could keep the painting, but I could keep it locked away. So we kept it in the cellar.
And there it would stay for over a decade, virtually forgotten. Fast forward to 2010. Sean rediscovers the Anguished Man and decides it's high time the painting takes its rightful place in the family home.
I finally persuaded my wife to have the painting in the house, and we put it in the spare bedroom.
But Sean's joy is short-lived. An ominous gloom begins to infiltrate their house.
There's just a general feeling of unease whenever the painting's in the house. I started having really bad nightmares, and they were all about this painting.
In the days that follow, it becomes clear that bad dreams are the least of Sean's problems. Although they've lived in the house for years, Sean and Dawn suddenly begin to hear sounds they've never noticed before.
We heard like a sobbing sound, like somebody crying, and then we heard loud bangs in the middle of the night, and the sound of like footsteps and creaking. But this only happened when the painting was in the house. There was the one time I was walking upstairs, and I got to the top of the stairs, and all of a sudden, from nowhere, I was surrounded by this strange mist. It was like a thick fog, and at first I thought there was a fire. It seemed like smoke or a fire in the house. And all of it, then just as suddenly as it came, it vanished, and there was nothing there. I had a good look around the house, looking for anything, couldn't find anything. But this definitely happened. The other things could be put down to imagination or hearing noises from outside. This was real.
But what really frightens Sean occurs when he goes to bed. His nightmares become alarmingly real.
I kept seeing this figure at the bottom of the bed. That happened nearly every night.
Not only do the strange apparitions continue, they start to target his wife.
She woke up one morning and she thought I was getting into bed beside her. She turned around to speak to me, and it wasn't me, it was somebody else. I ran upstairs, and she was in a real state, shaking and crying.
As paranormal activity in his house increases, Sean is convinced he knows its source.
We put two and two together and thought these things started happening when we brought the painting into the house.
Despite this conclusion, Sean insists on keeping the painting. That is, until it attacks his child.
I just got out of the shower and I was walking downstairs.
He felt this force in his back, as if something had pushed him.
I could just feel 2 hands on my back. And I fell down the stairs.
For Sean, it's the last straw. He decides to lock the anguished man away for good.
The painting was back in the cellar again. I couldn't take a chance if anybody was in any danger.
With the painting in the basement, the hauntings stop. But Sean's obsession with the anguished man doesn't. He brings it out again. This time he hopes to capture whatever is tormenting his family on video.
I set my video camera up overnight and left it running for about 8 hours.
Over the following 3 nights, Sean's camera captures remarkable events. First, a series of unexplained sounds. Then a door seems to close on its own, followed by the appearance of a ghostly figure. Finally, Sean captures something he is sure is the evidence he needs. Someone or something tips over the painting.
No explanation for that at all. The painting was at such an angle it shouldn't have fell. A lot of people are sceptical, and I can understand that because I was a skeptic myself, and I still am. But the footage is there for you to see. It wasn't faked. There could be a perfectly reasonable explanation, but I haven't found one yet.
Despite everything that happened, Sean still owns the anguished man.
I want to keep it. I'd love to have it hanging up, but I think now, since the incident with my son, I don't really want it in the house, just in case. I don't want to put anybody in any danger.
Is the ghost of a tortured soul living in a painting in Sean Robinson's cellar? Barry Guy is a paranormal investigator. He thinks the Robinson family is the victim of a rare and dangerous type of ghostly visitation, an intelligent haunting.
Intelligent hauntings are whereby spirits can interact with the living. They can make themselves known, we can communicate with them, they can move objects on command. They're even able to manifest themselves, so you can see them, communicate with them.
Guy claims he knows how the anguished man acquired its supernatural power.
I think that the painting might have absorbed some kind of energy, the artist's energy. It might well be a case that this painting itself has somehow transferred the soul of the artist who was in torment, and it's now affected the family.
Can a painting be haunted by its creator?
It is rare to have blood mixed into an oil painting, for example, but it has happened around the world. There are lots of different examples in cultures, different cultures especially around the world, that use blood and human blood and animal blood as a media to paint with, possibly by using his own blood and the fact that he was in torment at the time of painting it. All of that emotion is transferred through electromagnetics, really. You know, it's transferred into the painting. The ghost of this man could actually be living in the painting and then, you know, being released from the painting.
Guy is certain the attack on Sean's son won't be the last, and the next one could be fatal. The solution? Simple.
He could destroy the painting, that could be one. He could actually just take the painting outside of the home, remove it from the place he lives in, put it somewhere else, see whether that tries to stop. It would probably make life a lot easier for him.
Yes, 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 yes. So why doesn't he do it? Why don't you listen to the experts, Sean, huh? First this thing attacks you, then it attacks your wife, and then it almost kills your son. And what do? Nothing. Why do people behave like this? Okay, Sean, if you're watching, here's how easy it is, right? See? How hard can this be? Yeah? Oh. Wrong painting.
Did a tormented soul lay trapped inside a canvas until Sean released it? Or does this mystery have a different explanation?
There are portals that open up into evil spaces.
A family is tormented by apparitions after a man brings home a mysterious painting. Is the anguished man haunted? Psychiatrist Dr. Tracy Latz thinks the real story is even more out there. The anguished man is a portal to another world.
A portal is a two-way opening or doorway that allows us to enter into or connect to another dimension, be that spiritual, astral, or out in space. This artist had actually used some of his own blood. Now, red blood cells are interesting. It's one of the only cells in the body that, as it matures, it takes the nucleus and it extrudes it or spits it out of the cell, so that that cell is governed solely by the consciousness of the person in whom the blood is flowing. From a metaphysical standpoint, blood represents consciousness, and by the artist putting their blood into the paint and then putting it on that canvas, he was actually infusing it with his consciousness.
This startling claim defies all known laws of space and time. So how could it happen? Easy. Dr. Latz believes the artist did it unintentionally by simply focusing emotions as he painted the canvas.
Portals are actually much more common than people know or think, because we can open a temporary portal just by saying a prayer, which may actually open up, if we're in our heart, to the spiritual realm.
Did an artist allow an interdimensional traveler to enter the Robinsons' home?
I feel that there is a being or an entity coming out of the painting that is curious and trying to connect or influence or check out people that it is around.
But why would this entity viciously attack Sean's son?
There are portals that open up into darker, or what some people would call evil spaces, that may connect with that very low consciousness, like what you would see with serial killers, and that can feel very scary.
Did the painter of the anguished man make contact with beings from another dimension? And did one of them cross into our world? Not everyone is so sure. Paranormal investigator Mike St. Clair specializes in debunking fake haunting videos, and he's seen hundreds.
When I look at most of these videos, they're jokes to me. I mean, they're so easily debunkable, they're easy to pick apart because people are doing the same things. They're not doing anything new.
St. Clair says there are a number of gimmicks that amateur filmmakers use to create ghostly effects.
You can use strings and pull objects, and you can hide them with editing. One of the easiest ways to fake a paranormal video is to use a static shot. Inside of a static shot, you can make things disappear and reappear. You can use poor quality video, low lighting, jumpy, quick-moving video. You can even use actors running past the camera quickly.
Were tricks like these used by Sean Robinson?
Everything in these videos are easily recreatable, and there's no reason that anyone in their right mind should believe that there's paranormal activity going on behind this painting.
Is the anguished man video a hoax? And if so, how did Sean do it? St. Clair and colleague Jason Lundy are going to replicate an incident from the video, the ghostly door.
With just a couple $1 worth of fishing line and some duct tape, you can pull off just about anything.
It takes just minutes to set up.
This is the tricky part, getting up underneath the door. Oh, we're looking good. We've got our bracket on the wall, so not only can I pull the door shut from here, but I can also use the other string and pull it open as well. So that's gonna cut down on the amount of people that you would need to pull something off like this, because it's a possibility. The anguished man, it was only him doing the video, so therefore, he wouldn't have a lot of people to work, and he had to do it all by himself. And this is a good way of setting something up like this and actually pulling this entire thing off with one person. Let's do some magic.
The results are convincing.
Look at that, it's a ghost.
We did a better job than he did.
St. Clair still believes in ghosts, but he thinks fake hauntings give paranormal sightings a bad name.
It's important to expose the frauds and hoaxers because we put our heart and soul into what we do, and we take this field very seriously.
Did Sean Robinson fake the anguished man videos? Or was he visited by a demonic entity that used a painting as a doorway from a parallel world? Weird. After a devastating earthquake, a New Zealand man is savagely beaten by a phantom. Did a natural disaster release an evil spirit?
All I could feel was I was getting strangled.
Coming through. You know, when it comes to home renovations, I love to get down and dirty. Who needs master tradesmen when you can do it yourself, huh? There. A new doorway. May not be perfect, but who cares? But what if I told you that all this hard work could open other doors? Doors to things you would never ever want in your home?
September 1st, 2010. Alan Bennett and his wife Sandra put the finishing touches on their new home in Christchurch, New Zealand. Alan, a successful building contractor, has renovated the two-story house from the ground up.
It was quite a smart-looking little cottage, so knock walls out, put walls back. The only thing that stayed the same really is the 4 walls in this room here.
The Bennetts are still moving in when Alan has a surprise visit from a man he doesn't recognize.
He said he was the son of the original owner.
But the man doesn't come in. He simply hands Alan a picture.
And he gave this wee tiny black and white photo of the house. Right back in the 1930s. A bit of a weird sort of a photo.
Alan accepts the picture. But the gift leaves him with an uneasy feeling.
Just something about that photo that wasn't quite right. And the more I looked at it, the more annoyed I got.
Alan's uneasiness turns to rage. Finally, he snaps.
So I just took it off, ripped it in half, threw it in the rubbish bin. It just didn't make me feel good at all.
Alan tries to put the incident behind him. The very next day, all hell breaks loose. Christchurch is shattered by a 7.1 magnitude earthquake, the first major quake to hit the city in almost a century.
Oh, it was huge. If you tried to get out of bed, it would knock you over. And there was broken tiles all over the floor and broken glasses, and it went for a lot longer. And the intensity was sort of a lot harder than anything we'd ever felt before.
The city suffers widespread destruction and almost $4 billion in damage, including Alan's new house.
Well, the house is sunk nearly a foot. We haven't got a window or a door in the house that opens and shuts properly now. They're all jamming, sticking.
The building survives, but inside, Alan senses an eerie change. There's something in the air, and it feels like evil.
You'd be walking down the hallway or in your bedroom or having a shower, and you get this coal just woof straight into you and run up your legs, out your head, and you hear it stand out.
Alan hopes that whatever it is will simply go away. Instead, things get worse.
We were watching a movie and the door sort of just moved a bit, and then this thing just woofed into the lounge and stood in the middle of the lounge looking at us. Didn't move forward, just disappeared. And we just sort of looked at each other and what was that?
The encounters become so frightening, Alan and his wife consider leaving. But they've invested too much in the house to simply abandon it, so they stay. It's a decision they'll regret. At 3 a.m., Alan's woken by a terrifying noise.
Yeah, just this amazing bang on the side of the bed. The room's dark, the door's shut, there's no light, you know, I can't see anything. I just froze, you know, thinking, oh no, what's next?
The answer is difficult to comprehend. As Alan watches, something begins walking across the bed.
You felt the depression in the bottom of the mattress as it stands on the mattress, you know, and you're thinking, how's it doing this? And then all of a sudden it just pinned me down to the bed, so I'm trying to fight it off.
As his wife looks on in horror, Alan is fighting for his life against an invisible attacker.
I was getting strangled. I'm trying to fight with this thing strangling me out. It's like being sucked into a big plastic bag with a ton of bricks put on you.
But just when Alan is about to give up, the unexpected happens. The violent presence disappears. The attack has left them so shocked they wonder if they imagined it. But they soon discover the truth.
I had the fingerprints around the throat, the bruising.
And the injuries don't stop there. Soon, Alan finds more evidence that he was assaulted by something real.
When I was at work, my son said, "Look, show us your back." I said, "But there's nothing there to see." I didn't want there to be anything, you know. He said, "No, lift up your shirt and show us." And so I did, and I had a bruise about so big on the back, all with these veins. I went to the doctor and he said it was an impact bruise.
Looking back, he wonders if the stranger's visit was a warning.
Whether the photo's got anything to do with it, I don't know. Like, it all happened within days of me ripping it up.
Today, Alan is yet to come to terms with the attack.
I mean, if someone had told me 2 years ago you're going to get your bum kicked by a ghost, I would have just laughed.
You know, I've often had close encounters with spirits and ended up with a hangover. But that was the bad old days. This is weird, or what? At first, some strange guy knocks on Alan's door, doesn't even say hello. Then Alan is struck by an invisible force who runs riot in his bedroom, doesn't even knock. All this after an earthquake. No wonder Alan's unhappy. Ghosts are usually ghostly. This one came from the school of hard knocks.
Was Alan Bennett assaulted by a ghost? And if so, why was he attacked after an earthquake? Can spirits actually cause physical injuries?
Alan was dealing with a demonic entity.
A man is savagely beaten in his own bed by an invisible assailant. What attacked him? Christchurch paranormal investigator Anton Hayrick was hired by the Bennett family to investigate.
I had not dealt with a case where a physical attack had taken place and left, extensive marks in the area of the damage, where a witness had been next to the person and had witnessed the attack and couldn't explain it either. So it was the first of that kind, and it really stuck out, just Alan's fear for his safety.
Hayrick's investigation led him to a compelling theory. He thinks the Christchurch earthquake did more than damage the city. It released malicious spirits, evidenced by increased reports of paranormal activity.
The reports to our website and to my emails and even phone calls began to just increase massively after the earthquake. We couldn't keep up with what was going on.
Hayrick is convinced one of these spirits lay dormant in Alan Bennett's house until it was awakened by his renovation work.
Renovations is well known to spark all kinds of paranormal activity. It was very weak and it was very long in between, so the things that were happening were small things and there were long gaps in between it, sort of 2 years before the earthquake. Alan was dealing with a demonic entity. This may have been his house. Alan had already destroyed it and completely rebuilt it.
Hayrick thinks when the earthquake occurred, it supercharged the ghost, giving it the power to physically attack.
Earthquakes release a lot of energies that people don't think about, but are very similar to those that are released during a haunting.
Did the Christchurch earthquake release a ghost that attacked Alan Bennett? Can seismic activity make the spirit and human worlds collide? Psychologist Anna Baranowski agrees the earthquake is to blame for Alan's bizarre encounters, but not because it released ghosts. She thinks the quake was so traumatic, it caused Alan to suffer from a condition that often affects people in situations of extreme violence, like soldiers in combat. It's called post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD.
Whenever we're exposed to any significant event, it can absolutely lead to PTSD if we felt horror and terror and the worry of losing our life or being seriously injured. The DSM, our Diagnostic Statistical Manual, that's kind of like the Bible that psychiatrists and psychologists use when they are trying to do a diagnosis with a client. And in fact, PTSD was only first put into the DSM in 1980. So it is actually a fairly new term. And when I was doing my work, it was fairly new in terms of treatment. I mean, really what was happening is people were starting to develop a lot of their interventions and assessment protocols for actually working with people who were trauma survivors.
Known as shell shock during World War I, PTSD has long been the most common psychiatric problem facing soldiers. But only since the Vietnam War has the condition been treated as a serious health issue, especially as it can last for decades.
I do a lot of work with military members. These individuals might have experienced something 20 years ago. And I'm only seeing them for the very first time right now.
Dr. Baranowski says Alan's ghostly visions could be explained by one of PTSD's symptoms, violent nightmares and flashbacks.
Alan has been flooded with thoughts and memories, images, and anything that's a reminder of the trauma creates this explosion, this kind of cascade of physiological, emotional, behavioral responses.
Did mental trauma cause Alan to imagine a brutal encounter with a ghost? And if so, how does it explain his physical injuries? Dr. Joe Fisher is a professor of physiology at the University of Toronto. He too thinks the earthquake released something that caused Alan's visions, something deadlier than any apparition. A poison so stealthy, you're unaware it's affecting you until it's too late.
Carbon monoxide is a gas. It's completely tasteless and odorless. And you can't see it, it's colorless. And it's something that diffuses into the air.
Carbon monoxide is released when any kind of fuel burns without getting enough oxygen.
Carbon monoxide is the commonest cause of death and sickness from poisoning in the world.
What makes it so dangerous is an affinity for the hemoglobin molecules in our blood that carry oxygen to the body and the brain.
In the presence of carbon monoxide, the hemoglobin takes up the carbon monoxide rather than the oxygen. So it is very toxic. You need just tiny amounts of it to poison all your hemoglobin.
But does this explain Alan's violent haunting? Dr. Fisher is convinced carbon monoxide was making him see and hear things that simply weren't there.
One of the syndromes that they get from their carbon monoxide poisoning is a sort of neuropsychiatric syndrome where they could have, chronic hallucinations and other things. And this is even in the absence of any more carbon monoxide poisoning. And people are quite disabled with this. They have difficulty finding a job, working, family relationships, and other things because of these neuropsychiatric syndromes that are basically not really treatable.
Was Alan's house infiltrated by gas? Fisher's theory is even more compelling when you consider where it comes from.
Earthquakes actually do release carbon monoxide, and that's one of the ways that satellites pick up where earthquakes have occurred.
Hallucinations caused by carbon monoxide. It's a convincing theory, but there's just one problem. How does it explain Alan's bruises?
He was confused, hallucinating, bumped into things, or scared of what was happening and started flailing around. Maybe hurt himself in some way.
Did carbon monoxide gas poison Alan Bennett's mind? Could post-traumatic stress be responsible for his paranormal attacks? Or was a demonic spirit released by a seismic shockwave? Weird. Or what? So there we have it. Stories of hauntings of everyday objects from all over the world. In Florida, the pilots of a crashed plane returned from the grave to haunt Eastern Airlines flights. In Britain, a mysterious portrait is haunted by the soul of its creator. And in New Zealand, an earthquake releases a ghost that attacks a man in bed. Are these bizarre stories evidence that inanimate objects can harbor the spirits of the dead? You decide.
Join me next time for more stories that will undoubtedly be weird, or what?
I've been around for a while. I've met some interesting people. Done some crazy things. You'd think that there wasn't much that could take me by surprise. You'd be wrong. The world is full of stories and science and things that amaze and confound me every single day. Incredible mysteries that keep me awake at night. Some I can answer, and others just defy logic.
Is someone or something controlling our minds? remotely. In Colorado, a man finds a mysterious object in his body.
It probably had to be extraterrestrial in nature.
Are the brains of humans being monitored from outer space? In St. Louis, a seance turns a housewife into a literary genius.
She dictated 7 books, thousands of poems, short stories. It's incredible.
Can the dead take over the minds of the living? And in California, a woman causes machines and people to go haywire.
Electrical equipment didn't work anymore, my computer, my TV.
Is her mind being remotely controlled by the government?
Yeah, it's a weird world, and I love it.
Frightening, isn't it? There's an actual X-ray of construction worker Patrick Lawler. He went to the dentist complaining of a toothache. Instead, he found a 4-inch nail embedded in his skull from his nail gun. It's amazing what you can find inside people. Here's another, a cell phone hidden inside an inmate. How did he get my phone number? And this one, a man who accidentally swallowed some scissors while using them as a toothpick. And, here's one of mine. Well, never mind. Despite being bizarre, all of these things are easily explainable, except this one. This was found inside another man. A man who has no idea what it is or how it got there, or even if it came from Earth.
Yuma County, Colorado, 1998. Cement contractor Tim Cullen is on a routine job when he suffers an injury.
I was doing some work for a farmer early in the summertime, and I'd hit my thumb with a hammer, melted it pretty good. My wife, she's a nurse. She said, well, you might as well go, why don't you go to the doctor and get it looked at.
Tim's thumb turns out to be fine, but the doctor who examines him finds something else, something he can't explain.
The doctor took an x-ray, and he said, you have something in your arm? I said, no. He said, you got any idea where it come from?
Tim is baffled by the news.
The object in the x-ray is kind of a bright triangle in the x-ray. Real bright, right next to my wrist bone. It was kind of interesting to know that something got in my body. I really didn't know anything about it.
The doctor decides to operate, but during the surgery, something extraordinary happens.
They were doing the surgery, and I got to watch it on a fluoroscope. As the doctor got ready to remove the object, when he got close to it, it seemed to move away from the forceps that he was going to remove the object with. Like the object sensed that it was going to be removed. They finally got a hold of it, and that's when my arm really got to hurt. And we got it drawn up near the surface and put the snip on it, took it loose.
As the doctor examines the object, he realizes why it reacted strangely. Inside a membrane is a core of metal. There are also proprioceptors, wire-like appendages that seem to be connected to nerve endings leading to his hand.
There was no anti-rejection structures around the whole object at all. The body doesn't even know it's there. I mean, it's metal, and nothing more foreign to the body than metal.
At first, Tim makes a steady recovery, but his health suddenly begins to decline.
My mental ability started sliding downhill. My ability to concentrate and to stay awake went downhill really rapidly. It's just like I dropped my wheel. I feel like instead of being a 60-year-old man, I have to take a nap like an 80, 85-year-old man.
Certain his health issues are connected to the object. Tim searches his memory for clues. Then it hits him. A mysterious incident 20 years earlier that made no sense at all, until now.
We were coming back one night. It was the evening, late night, probably 11 o'clock or so. Coming up Highway 59, and we encountered this craft in front of us. Looked like it was about 100 foot long. It looked like a cigar. There were some lights on it.
Tim stops for a better view. Whatever it is moves like nothing on Earth.
It crossed the road, crossed over the fence and under the telephone lines. And the next thing you know, bingo, it's kind of by the car, and then it's back up here. And my wife and I sat there, and 2 lights came on. They were really bright because, like I say, my peripheral vision was kind of gone.
Time seems to stand still for Tim and his wife.
After the lights came on, and my wife and I were sitting there in the car for what I perceive is 4 or 5 minutes. It was a mind-bending experience for me at the time. We sat there wondering what to do, you know, thinking about it, and then I looked at the wife and said, let's go.
When they arrive home, they discover they've been gone not for minutes, but hours. Tim can't account for the lost time.
There was lots of things that may have happened, you know, I don't know. But missing time, I don't get remembered. And it does make it interesting for me.
There is one thing Tim is sure of. He was taken on board an alien spaceship and implanted with the mental object. Why?
The aliens want to interfere with my thought processes for some reason. It's a form of mind control. You know, we're not the only intelligent mortal life form in this universe. It makes me wonder why me? And I truly do. I'll never get over it.
This is weird. Or what? A guy doing some simple DIY ends up finding this thing inside him. Can Tim Cullen be right? Was this device created by an extraterrestrial, then implanted in his arm during an alien abduction and used somehow to control his mind? It's an incredible concept, isn't it? But I have an even more important question. When will they be on sale at Radio Shack?
What happened to Tim Cullen? Did an alien life form implant a device inside him to control his mind? Ex-police officer Daryl Sims is known as the Alien Hunter. He counsels people who claim they've been abducted by extraterrestrials.
Our abductees range from everything from housewives, husbands, they work, hard-working people. We've got 3 NASA scientists that are abductees, one of them with implants. An alien implant is an object or a device that is surreptitious, and it is parasitic, and it's installed in a human being, and it's done for specific reasons. Most of the time, people that have implants don't even know they're there. They have no clue. They'll have a car accident, they'll be in any kind of an accident, or we have to go to a doctor, and the doctor will do an x-ray, and he'll overlap some area and say, what in the world is that?
He's convinced Tim's UFO experience was not only real, it wasn't his first.
He's a typical individual that had no clue what was going on. I suspect his events started very much younger in his life. Many people who find out they're an abductee later in life don't realize that they've had events long before. Most of the time, not all the time, most of the time. Events start when you're quite young. And not only that, but the second question I would ask him, how many people in your family have you talked to about these events? Grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, and so on. You're going to find you're not alone in your family. It is in your family lineage.
But why did Tim have no memory of what happened?
Once the encounter takes place, they leave on the individual what is called a screen memory. This is often the true false memory syndrome. They leave an imagery and thoughts and feelings with you. The majority of them are not present experiences.
Despite this, Tim knew something inexplicable was happening to his body and his mind.
For the first 20 years when I had the implant in my body, I believe I was smarter. My mental function was greatly enhanced. I believe the implant was there to mentally stimulate me.
The implant was affecting his neurotransmitters, chemicals that regulate mood, behavior, and other critical functions in the brain.
Abductees often feel, why am I having these feelings? Their levels of serotonin and dopamine being altered, as one a psychologist told me, he says, anyone that can do that to you, I don't care who it is, they own you. They own your emotions, they own everything about you.
Sim says implants don't just change the way the brain works, they actually record what it's doing.
They're there to do a job, and one of the things they're to do is to collect huge amounts of information, particularly emotions, enormous amounts of emotions, a huge wide variety and span of emotions, and to collect them and to bring them back.
But why would aliens implant these devices in humans?
That's the $64,000 question. Everybody's focusing on the wrong thing. That's what bothers me. I come from an intelligence background. The whole thing's an intelligence problem. It always has been.
Did aliens try to control Timothy Cullen? Or is the true explanation more down to earth?
NASA knows where every bolt is floating around up there.
A mysterious object is found in a man's arm. Was it inserted by extraterrestrials in order to control it? Dr. Michael Shermer is the publisher of Skeptic magazine. He spent 30 years investigating alien stories.
The Tim Cullen story has been around for a long time in UFO lore. He's one of the handful that they hold up as somebody who came to the realization that he was abducted decades after the event happened. So this is in one of two categories of alien abduction stories. Those who remember it immediately, and they describe that they were asleep at night and so on, and those that remembered it decades later, triggered by perhaps regression analysis or just talking to other UFO abductees, and you get the idea going, like, hey, maybe this happened to me, and then you, in your mind, reconstruct it. So he's one of the latter. Yes, you hear about these implants with alleged microcircuitry and things like that. I've never seen one. I've never seen a published article about this. I've never heard of a scientist examining anything like that. Of all the implants that have been tested that I've seen, rigorously tested, they've all concluded that these were natural, earthbound artifacts. Shrapnel, piece of metal, splinter, that kind of thing. Not any kind of extraterrestrial.
Dr. Shermer has studied video of Tim's surgery. He saw nothing to suggest the object was controlling his brain.
Seeing the video of the surgeon removing it, it didn't look like that at all to me. It looked like it was actually quite loose in there, because as he was poking the tongs in there to grab it, it was moving around. It didn't look connected to any nerves at all.
But what about the strange membrane the doctor found?
We do know that something that's been in the body for a long time gets coated by the body. It's a way of protecting itself. That may look metal when you see it, but it's just actually some other organic material. And I suspect that's all it is. Our brains are really good at doing that, even with just random noise coming in. And so more cell phones, more internet websites, more information coming in only provides a greater sea of randomness from which the brain can find patterns. And so conspiracies are perfect examples of that.
Was Tim making it all up? Not necessarily. Dr. Shermer is sure Tim had some kind of traumatic experience, but pop culture made him blame it on ETs.
In the Middle Ages, the narratives talk about demons, because they live in a demon-haunted world. 200 years ago, 150 years ago, these were poltergeists and ghosts, because that's the world they lived in. Our century, aliens. So our anomalous psychological experiences are interpreted through that filter.
Colin Ross is a psychiatrist specializing in severe mental trauma. He agrees something was trying to control Tim Cullen, but it wasn't aliens.
I get contacted quite regularly by email and mail by people who absolutely firmly believe that they're being monitored and controlled remotely by the CIA, the military, or the government. They'll describe how they were involved in the military, how they had a security clearance, they got in some sort of beef with some other person, and then it all started.
But how could the government control someone's brain?
It's a known fact that from the documents, and this is going back 40, 50 years now, that you can control somebody's behavior remotely by activating an electrode that's in their brain. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's a medical proven fact.
Dr. Ross says the origins of mind control technology began from a desire to tap the skills of German scientists smuggled into the US after World War II.
Operation Paperclip is one of a series of projects that was created by the CIA after the Second World War. And it was to get control of the German scientists. So the US government wanted to bring a lot of expertise over to the United States. Rocket engineers, ball bearing manufacturers, film, whatever it might be, and brought them into the United States for use in research.
One of them, Dr. Werner von Braun, helped the Americans take the lead in the space race. Did another German scientist give the U.S. the edge in mind control? Dr. Ross thinks so, and that the U.S. is still using the technology.
I'm quite confident that there must be military and CIA implanted chips in people around the world for various purposes.
But why would the U.S. government want to control people's minds? Simple. To achieve global domination by turning ordinary people into fearless assassins, activated by remote control.
The way you control a behavior is kind of twofold. The electrode can actually activate part of your brain, or you can hypnotically condition a person. So the idea is you condition the person to have this new identity inside, who's hidden behind an amnesia barrier. You call them out with a hypnotic code, give them the assignment. They go back inside, they carry out the assignment. If the out front person is captured and interrogated, has no information, no memory of it whatsoever. And there's documents going back into the 50s. This was actually done and used operationally by the military and the CIA, actually going back to the Second World War. The way I got into all that was I started hearing stories from patients in treatment that they had been programmed and conditioned by the CIA or the military. I thought, a little fantastic sounding, and decided to look into it.
Was Timothy Cullen being groomed as a covert government assassin? Are aliens trying to control his brain? Or did he just imagine the whole thing? Whatever the truth, it's weird, or what? A seance turns a housewife into a literary genius.
She only has an 8th grade education, which is quite amazing.
Hi. I'm just trying to contact the spirits. Oh. I'll be with you in a minute. L. WTFLOL. Means nothing to me. But do Ouija boards really work? Millions think so. It was invented as a harmless parlor game over a century ago. Since then, it's become a tool regarded by many as the only genuine way we can communicate with the dead. Well, they're dead wrong. There's another way. And it won't just give you a few random letters, but enough to fill entire libraries. All you need is your mind.
July 8th, 1913, St. Louis, Missouri. At the height of the progressive era, the suffrage movement is working to bring women the vote and unshackle them from traditional roles. One of the newly liberated women is housewife Pearl Lenore Curran, who is enjoying a visit from her neighbor.
Pearl Curran was born in 1883. She only has an 8th grade education. She wasn't really passionate about anything.
Physicist and author Dr. Jan van der Zande is an expert on mediums and psychic phenomena.
She didn't read much, she didn't travel much. So here you have a lady who's, let's put it this way, boring.
The fashion of the day, Pearl and her friend are playing with a Ouija board, trying to contact spirits.
The Ouija board is a board where all the letters of the alphabet are in a circle. And in the center, you put a glass upside down. And then you have about 2 or 3 people in the room put their hands on the glass. And if someone there is a medium, the glass will start spelling out words.
Despite many attempts, they fail to raise the dead. But Pearl is persuaded to try one last time.
They were playing, and all of a sudden the thing really started moving. There was no way she knew where it was going. The spirits were using her to move the planchette on the Ouija board.
Someone or something is communicating with them. The glass begins to spell out a message.
Many moons ago I lived. Again I come. Patience worth my name. Wait, I would speak with thee. Good friends, let us be merry. The time for work is past. Let a tabby drowse and blink her wisdom to the fire log. Now that is not normal English.
They are connecting with someone named Patience Worth. Who was she?
Patience Worth claims she was born in 1649 in rural Dorchester in England. And when she was about 30, she claimed she came to the US in Nantucket. And there, when she was 44 or 45, she was killed by the Indians.
Patience's essence is overwhelming. She is so powerful, Pearl suddenly realizes she no longer needs the Ouija board.
She starts getting the words before the thing even moves. So that's how she knew she was the medium. She's hearing the voices and the dictation from Patience. And she's what they call a mental medium, where she's awake, and the spirit dictates, so she hears what the spirit says. The spirit doesn't take over. They don't take over her mind. They talk to her. This is what's called clairvoyance, where you have a medium giving a clairvoyance demonstration. She will go to the audience and say, you, I have this message for you. I have your uncle here and he's telling me this, or I see him standing beside you and he's telling me this. That's clear audience, like she was. Where she hears the voices, she was seeing images, pictures, while she was getting patients talk to her. And that was then written down. So that's how she developed.
Over the coming months, Pearl's literary output is prolific.
Patients dictated 7 books, thousands of poems, short stories. It's incredible.
Her stories are filled with obscure details of 17th century life, things she simply could not have known. Pearl publishes her work. The critics love it.
For example, the New York Tribune, it's a famous paper, review of a book called Hope Trueblood, a work approximating absolute genius. I mean, what kind of comments are those? They're incredible comments. Then the New York Evening Post. The unusual distinction about this patient's worth is her exceptional, consistent intelligence. You ever talk about an 8th grade woman who's dictating this? Ladies' Pictorial of London. This book will stand as a landmark of fiction by a new writer who will take a prominent place among great writers. This is what's so impressive about this woman and the books that she wrote down.
Pearl's unlikely transformation attracts the attention of skeptical scientists who seek a rational explanation.
Dr. Franklin Prince, he has a PhD from Yale, and he was the head of the American Society for Psychical Research. They asked him to investigate her. So he spent several weeks interviewing her, sitting in on her sessions when she was writing.
But the doctor finds no evidence of deception.
His conclusions were that Mrs. Curran was not fraudulent, and she was not nuts or anything like that. She was a normal person.
Patience and Pearl's ghostwriting partnership continues for almost a quarter of a century, until 1937, when, in an eerie twist, Patience uses her final message to deliver a chilling prediction.
Patience actually told her in her last communication that the end was drawing near. And all of a sudden she got sick and she died. There's no doubt about it in my mind. This is a case of mental mediumship where spirits communicate with her.
It's an incredible story. You know, people often ask me if I use a ghostwriter with all these memoirs and novels and poetry that I've published over the years, and I'm not ashamed to say I do. Not that I couldn't do it all by myself, obviously. I'm a busy guy with a busy schedule. This is Fred, he's very talented. What you got going for me today? I told you to stay off of Facebook when you're on working hours, Fred. I want you to send a note to my wife. Tell her I'm with her in spirit.
How did Pearl Curran write so accurately about things she knew nothing about? Can paranormal entities take over our minds? Professor Stephen Browdy is an expert in parapsychology and editor-in-chief of the Journal of Scientific Exploration.
I personally don't think Pearl Curran was channeling an entity, Patience Worth. The character Patience Worth provided very few clues about her alleged earthly life, just that she lived in the 17th century around Dorset in England, at some point came to the US, and was killed in some kind of battle with Native Americans. That's pretty much all we know. So there's very little evidence. And what you look for in a good case suggesting survival after death is, first of all, somebody manifesting knowledge or abilities closely associated or uniquely associated with some deceased person. And you need evidence suggesting that those abilities or that knowledge were not acquired through normal means. We don't see that in the Patience Worth case.
So who was the literary genius? For Browdy, the answer is easy: Pearl Curran.
My best guess about the Patience Worth case is that Pearl Curran was a kind of dissociative virtuoso, somebody who could go into a kind of altered state, and in that state access various abilities and reservoirs of knowledge that ordinarily were not at her disposal. In Pearl's case, I think she went into a kind of light trance at the Ouija board, a kind of dissociative state, and in that state she was able to bypass certain barriers to creativity she had erected through most of her life.
Was Pearl Curran a world-class writer without even knowing it? If so, Browdy's theory leaves a nagging question.
One of the main and lingering puzzles about the case is how Pearl Curran acquired the knowledge that she did of life in England during the Victorian era so that she could write her novel Hope Trueblood. It's possible that she might have encountered some of the materials in her everyday life. My suggestion about this is that Pearl Curran had some latent and quite formidable linguistic talents, which were just waiting for the proper time to nurture them and to bring them out.
Was Patience Worth just the name Pearl Curran gave to her inner author? How did she know so much about things she hadn't experienced?
She was just getting it directly from that time, from that space.
A poorly educated housewife becomes a literary master. Did she possess hidden talents? Cynthia Larson doesn't think so. She's an author and expert on the physics of reality, the building blocks of everything we know and experience.
The Pearl Curran story is extraordinary, and when I first heard about it, I was amazed with the syntax, the language, and the everyday experiences.
How did Pearl access this ancient knowledge in perfect detail? Quantum physics, of course.
My theory about Pearl Curran is that she was quantum jumping back in time and making several jumps back to different points in space and time, and doing so due to the fact that we are all, even though we're on a very large scale, we're capable of doing things at the quantum scale, such as making a quantum jump. And this is exactly what happened with Pearl Curran.
If you can imagine this universe as consisting of very many parallel, alternate realities, then what you're doing is actually choosing which one of those you want to go to, establishing a kind of a connection to it through some meditative process, and then bringing the correct energy to it to make that jump.
In addition to alternate realities, Larson thinks quantum jumps can take us both backward and forward in time.
Usually when we think of time travel, we think in terms of time being linear. What's extremely different about quantum jumping is that we're working with the theory that we have many worlds, many alternate realities. That means there were many possible beginnings. We're right now moving toward many possible futures, and currently, right here and right now, we have access to an infinite number of possible alternate realities. In terms of scientific research, there's no exact evidence and proof that quantum jumping is occurring. There are, however, some exciting findings right now with quantum behavior occurring at the macro level. And some of this experimental work has been done recently in Oxford, England, where a couple of diamonds 15 centimeters apart were entangled. That means that they were precisely moving in conjunction with one another at room temperature, which is a big deal, separated 15 centimeters apart. So what we're witnessing is seeing some of these very small scale micro level effects, the quantum effects, at the macro level. And that's forcing us to rethink all of our assumptions about what reality really is.
Quantum jumping into the past might explain how Pearl wrote with such vivid detail. But how did she do it?
When people have this experience, they often are in a meditative state.
I think what Pearl was able to do by staying in that mindset, she was literally making what you might call a quantum jump into that reality, that for her it was extremely real. And so when the words came through, it wasn't something that she was interpreting, she was just getting it directly from that time, from that space.
What makes Pearl Curran's story so believable is we can see that she was clearly connecting with very definite times and spaces.
Did Pearl Curran access some hidden talent to write her novels? Or was she quantum leaping back and forth through time? Psychic Ellie Crystal sees no need to dispute Curran's version of events.
Pearl could not have known the information that she was writing about. She did not have access to the computer technologies we have today. Pearl wrote all her books based on her connections with the collective unconscious and an entity she called Patience Worth.
But how was she able to contact the spirit? Crystal is certain that Pearl was, like herself, a psychic.
As a psychic, you're moving your consciousness from this reality to another reality, getting information and bringing it back.
To show just how easy it is to tap into information from the dead, Crystal is going to demonstrate by contacting the spirit of none other than Pearl Curran.
The energy of Pearl is still in the grids. Pearl is saying, she's showing me 2 keys. Beautiful gold keys. She's writing now.
Crystal says this kind of channeling is called automatic writing.
The waters will be big. The land areas will fall. She has more to say. She's coming back into me again, though. No World War III. No World War III. No World War III. 2012. 2012. 2012. The balance scales over here. Like a kid's seesaw. When I'm doing automatic writing, I just let my hand go across the page and write whatever comes out, and it just goes and goes and goes to a point where you just have this feeling of being complete. And then you look down and you see what you wrote.
Is this how Pearl wrote her bestsellers?
If you can look at our reality as a hologram, okay? It's consciousness, it's like a hologram, and it's made up of grids. Within those grids is everything that ever existed in this reality or anything else that's going on simultaneous to it. What she did as a channeler, she would take her pen and her paper and she would tap into the grids. It's not a magical thing. It's really all science and math. Automatic writing is something you come back to all the time, and you keep writing and writing. It can get very addictive also.
Did Pearl Curran travel back in time and report what she saw? Did she contact a long-dead spirit to write her novels? Or was she tapping into an ability she never knew she had? We may never know. Weird or what? In California, a woman causes machines and people to go haywire.
Electrical equipment didn't work anymore. My computer, my TV.
Oh my God. You know, I wish I had one of these when I was a kid. Isn't this amazing? It's hard to believe, isn't it? I can control every movement of this tiny device. Up. Yeah, and watch this. Down, down, up. I have complete power over it. I can make it perform even the most intricate of maneuvers without even... Guess I need more practice. Wireless devices like this are no longer a novelty. But what if instead of a helicopter, you could control someone's brain? Now that would make for an interesting story. Here it is.
September 1988. It is the start of the fall semester at the University of California, Davis, where Cheryl Welch is beginning life as a law student.
I grew up in Sacramento, California. I was a receptionist at Kaiser Hospital for 10 years. I decided that I wanted to go back to school, so I went to UC Davis.
But as her studies get underway, things change.
I know what normal life is, and life became very abnormal.
It starts with her telephone.
Usually you pick up a phone, you hear dial tone. But my phone, there would be click noises. There'd be a long pause, then static.
She has it checked, but the strange noises continue. Cheryl becomes concerned. It's the first of many appliances that behave erratically in her presence.
Things in my environment, all of the electrical equipment didn't work anymore. My computer, my TV.
Her unease grows as she discovers it's not only machines that act strangely around her.
Police cars started to follow me. I had a rock thrown at my car. Somebody tried to drive me off the road. I mean, I've never had a ticket. I've never taken drugs. People in my environment were acting out of character. I was acting my normal self. And people were acting weird. People turned against me. People would stare at you. Students would swear and spit on me.
Weirder still, random strangers on the street seem to know exactly what she's thinking.
I felt like I was surveilled. I thought somebody could read my thoughts.
Cheryl's personal life falls apart as friends and family drift away. Then, she's fired from her job.
It was like shock and awe. For 3 years, it was like that. I realized, you know, this wasn't going to go away, despite my best efforts. That was a really depressing, blackest moment of my life. I just cried and cried and cried. I thought, why not just end it?
Fearing for her sanity, Cheryl seeks help.
So I went to my advisor, and I was having trouble academically, and she helped me get through this, and she was the only one that believed me.
Her advisor comes to a quick conclusion. Cheryl is the victim of a deliberate and organized campaign of harassment. But who is behind it?
First, we checked out. We thought, maybe there's a psychology experiment. They're trying to stress you out. There was no psychology experiment. So I hired private investigators, and I tried to figure out if there were any bugs in my apartment. Nothing. Talking to my advisor, we both figured only the government would have this kind of control over your telephone or what you did in the privacy of your apartment.
Deciding to investigate, Cheryl gains access to government documents. They reveal the unthinkable. A top-secret experiment is subjecting everyday citizens to mind control.
Major countries have developed this secret mind control technology, especially Russia and the United States.
She's convinced the people who harassed her were under mind control and didn't even know it.
Somebody is making them do things, without their knowing it.
But why choose Cheryl?
You're going to need to experiment on a lot of people. You can't do it ethically, so you're going to do it covertly,
She thinks she knows what put her on the government's radar.
Before I went to UC Davis, I went to the Army recruiting office. I filled out the forms, I put in my application, but I went to UC Davis instead. And then after that was when this happened. After networking with other victims, they have that connection. Former people who applied to the CIA, former people who have relatives in the government or the CIA are often targets.
Are the minds of innocent citizens being controlled by government-sanctioned experiments? Is Cheryl Welch telling the truth, or are her claims absurd? Just another conspiracy theory that's impossible to prove? Maybe, but not if you listen to Nick Begich.
I think there's some good evidence that Cheryl Welch and many of the other people I've spoken with have been victimized by this electromagnetic mind control experiments. The weapons of this century aren't bombs and bullets and ordnance, but electromagnetic energy targeting the human being, which is a greatest revolution in military affairs since gunpowder.
Begich is an expert in government mind control. He is convinced the Pentagon has mastered a technology once thought to be science fiction: the ability to broadcast information directly into the human brain.
Our government began spending a lot of time looking at how to modify behavior of human beings. Going back to the Korean War, in fact, in a publication, Low-Intensity Conflict in Modern Technology, they have a chapter on electromagnetic weapon systems, being able to not just to debilitate someone, but actually even to stimulate certain activities within the brain.
But how?
HAARP is the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project, which started as a joint effort of the Air Force and Navy. This is a very large array or field of antennas based in Alaska, radio frequency antennas. And normally when radio frequency energy comes off of an antenna, it spreads out, just like shining a light on the wall. It follows the same principles in physics. The light spreads out, becomes less dense, radio signals become less dense, so the further you get away from the transmitter, the weaker the signal. With HAARP, what they do is use an array or field of antennas. Right now there's 180 in that array. What they do is create a cyclotron resonance, which is could be visualized as sort of a corkscrewing motion of the energy, and as it goes higher and higher, it gets tighter and tighter.
HAARP antennas transmit powerful radio signals into the upper atmosphere to study the effects on wireless communications. But Begich says HAARP can also be used for more sinister ends.
HAARP has announced several other programs and campaigns, and there's two areas that I got very concerned about. One was weather modification applications. The other was the effect on human beings. If you can modulate a signal that the brain locks onto, recognizes, and begins to mirror or follow the frequency following response. The brain rhythms change, then it creates a chemical cascade within the brain, and the emotions change. Now the resolution gets finer and finer and finer. And it used to just to be about triggering emotions. You could change people's brain chemistry pretty readily, change their emotional state pretty easily. But when you get down to the idea of thoughts and being able to manipulate those, that requires a different kind of sophistication.
Can we hear sounds without using our ears? Not only is it possible, says Begich, he can prove it using sound recordist Brad Daw.
So what I'm going to demonstrate is a earth pulse sound wave, and what this is an infrasound device. It's just a small electronic circuit that we run a CD player playing some Bach, into our circuit and then comes out through 2 piezoelectric transducers. So I'm going to place these transducers on your face. You're going to block your ears tightly. We put those in contact with the skin and listen.
Yeah.
So what do you hear?
I hear the music, yeah, loudly.
Right in the center of their forehead, inside their head, they'll hear Bach, just like they would with their ears, but the ears aren't involved. Now, I can take this away. If you'd hold this on there with one finger.
Yeah.
And then we'll show that this current actually can transit. So it only works when I touch your head or when I touch your skin, but essentially the current's going through both of us, but the signal does not go down. It maintains sound volume.
It wasn't through my ears at all. It was basically, it felt like kind of it was coming from the middle of my head, no direction, and it was clear. So not through my ears at all, which is pretty cool.
Now we can do this wirelessly with microwave. So there's lots of ways to do it, and this just gives a very simple sort of workbench model that gives the principle so people can understand, yeah, you can really do it.
It's just a little deaf, man. I got a headbanger. Now, this is a fascinating theory, but there's just one problem. I'm not sure these piezoelectric transducers are going to catch on as a fashion accessory. And frankly, I don't even know what piezoelectric means. But if we're to believe Begich, the government don't even need these. They're tapping directly into our minds, controlling us with powerful, invisible microwaves that can alter the very way we think and act, making us believe anything they want us to. And that's just the Republicans.
Is the government manipulating our minds wirelessly, or does the answer lie elsewhere?
There's some kind of organization out to get them.
A California woman suffers a brutal campaign of harassment. Is the government trying to control her mind? Clinical psychologist J. Ryan Fuller believes Cheryl's experience isn't due to harassment, but mental illness.
When I heard of some of the things that were described, certainly bring to mind the kinds of content that sometimes people with psychotic disorders have.
He thinks Cheryl has a classic case of delusional disorder.
A delusional disorder is a particular type of psychotic disorder where there's going to be false belief that's held very, very strongly despite evidence being presented again and again to a person. And it's going to be, in that case, when it's the non-bizarre kind of delusion, information that people within that cultural group would believe could happen, but in this case, there doesn't seem to be any evidence to support it. So one might think that their spouse is constantly cheating, and that would be a jealous type. If it's a persecutory type, it could be that I'm being harassed by the police or the FBI, despite the facts that there isn't evidence to confirm that that's actually going on. And so I might believe that my mother-in-law is trying to poison me with her cooking. It's something that could happen in the real world, but there isn't any evidence to confirm it.
But what about the strangers who spit at Cheryl in the street?
The interpretation that people are going to be insulting them or hostile or have malicious intent is very, very common. It could be that I'm being harassed by the police or the FBI. There's a conspiracy. There's some kinds of organization or people kind of out to get them that's going to sort of lead to sort of suspiciousness and hypervigilance and things like that.
Ironically, Cheryl could be making it worse.
There is evidence, in fact, that by struggling with it and sort of fighting it and working to change it, that does, in fact, increase the one's stress level and increase anxiety. And now, more than in years past, there's a growing body of literature that, in fact, changing that dynamic, not necessarily changing the belief system, the delusions, but rather changing the strategy of fighting it might be a way to help treat these people. If you think about the delusions themselves, and it really does depend on the content and the person, because someone could be putting themselves and others at great risk, because there are cases where someone with a delusional disorder can be, angry, aggressive, and even physically violent. There are other cases where the real harm is going to come from the negative emotions they experience as a function of the belief. So they end up becoming incredibly depressed, incredibly anxious, incredibly lonely, socially isolating. And so now they're not only suffering all the emotional pain, now they're also denying themselves the social support and possibly the kind of meaning and vitality they might get from other kind of life pursuits. And so there can be a great deal of suffering.
Is Cheryl Welsh suffering from delusions? Or is the real explanation even more out there? Trish McGregor has written about the paranormal for over 30 years. She thinks she can explain at least one of Cheryl's experiences, her strange encounters with electrical equipment.
My theory about Cheryl Welch is it could be the Pauli effect. The Pauli effect is a label, a term, that grew out of a phenomenon that used to happen whenever Wolfgang Pauli, who was a theoretical physicist, would walk into a science lab and equipment would spontaneously break down.
Wolfgang Pauli was a brilliant Nobel Prize-winning physicist who counted Einstein himself among his many admirers. But Pauli is also remembered for his ability to cause lab equipment to malfunction simply by being near it.
In 1950, he walked into a lab in Princeton where they had a particle accelerator, and it caught on fire and burned. This lab in Hamburg banned Pauli from the lab. I mean, that's how prominent this whole phenomenon became.
Even stranger, the Pauli effect didn't stop at the laboratory.
On Pauli's second honeymoon, he and his wife set off for a car trip. He had a new battery in the car, and the battery died. And Pauli said, the Pauli effect, here it is. It would happen in other strange ways, too. One time in Hamburg, Pauli and two friends met for lunch. And after the 3-hour lunch, the two friends realized that the entire time they had been sitting on whipped cream. And Pauli hadn't. It wasn't the fact that he was a klutz. It wasn't like he was stumbling into equipment. He would walk in, and without doing anything, the equipment would spontaneously just break down. They kept saying, oh, it's coincidence, you know, this is scientifically impossible, and yet it kept happening.
Is Cheryl suffering from the Pauli effect? McGregor says we can't dismiss the possibility.
I don't think we can say to Cheryl Welch, what you experience is not real, because it is. It's real to her.
Cheryl Welch, the victim of a series of bizarre coincidences? Was she the target of a government experiment in mind control? Or is it all in her head? Weird, or what? So there we have it. 3 stories of mind control. An implant turbocharges a man's brain. Is it an alien device? A housewife turns into a literary genius. Is she channeling a spirit from the 17th century? And a woman suffers a bizarre campaign of harassment. Is she a guinea pig for a secret technology? You decide.
Join me next time for more stories that will undoubtedly be weird or what.